University of Wisconsin Medical School, giving my 30th of 36 lectures. Today's lecture is called Habitat That Our Species Gravitates Towards, and how that matters profoundly to Alfred, whom you're about to meet, age 10, and to us. Now here's a quotation from E.O. Wilson, which is the preface goes before the lecture. He was my first teacher of biology at Harvard, and his book is called The Social Conquest of Earth, and this is what he says. This will give us our habitat. Studies have shown that given freedom to choose the setting of their homes or offices, people across cultures gravitate towards an environment that combines three features, intuitively understood by landscape architects and real estate people. First, they want to be on a height looking down, preferring open savanna-like territory with scattered trees and copses. And thirdly, they want to be close to a body of water, such as river, lake, or ocean. People, in other words, prefer to live in those environments in which our species evolved over millions of years. 2 millions of years. Instinctively, they gravitate towards savanna forest and transitional forest, looking out safely over a distance towards reliable sources of food and water. Now, I have pictured for you in words the kind of habitat that our species gravitates toward as most favorable to its evolution. I would like to add something else that Wilson says about our species in this habitat in Africa for millions of years in the Ice Age. Namely, that evolving up high in trees on the edge of savanna and water meant we become animals who rely on the two distance senses, our eyes and our ears, and less reliance on touch and taste and palpation that ground animals have. The two distance senses give us extraordinary advantages when positioned in the heights of trees overlooking savannas and some body of water. We become able to see and hear at great distances both opportunities for game, like antelope, and water, another crucial resource. And we also hear and see at great distances predators like lions closing in on feeding animals right beneath our feet at the water hole. We become able to see and hear before we are seen and heard. This is our considerable advantage for evolution in the Lotka scenario discussed many times in this lecture. With the distance senses positioned, and this is very important, in the trees, we overlook and overhear the territory before we go forage in it, and before we subject ourselves to being captured, so we can get back in time to safety high in the trees. Now, I would like to demonstrate how this evolutionary perspective bears on our work with our patients as well it must. I will begin with Winnicott's consultation to Alfred, age 10, 1 hour, and illustrate how he crosses over with Alfred from his conscious compartment, where Alfred is obviously anxious with the stuttering, but he has no line of sight for the danger that is triggered this stuttering in the boy. It's just not evident. That's what the consultation has to see, make sense of, put in context. Now, however, crossing over to the unconscious compartment in what Winnicott calls a dream drop, both the first line of sight for the danger and the second line of sight for what will deliver Alfred appear. Consciously, it's not there. Okay, this is one of my favorites, this case, Alfred, for a long time, but I now I'm putting it in a big evolutionary context. That's the difference. His mother brought Alfred for a recent onset of stuttering. Winnicott immediately noticed that when he asked Alfred questions about his father, Alfred tried very hard and stuttered more, right? Conversely, when Winnicott did not ask Alfred questions, the boy became easy with Winnicott and no longer stuttered. So now we have the phenomenon and we have not the phenomenon. We're already on the edge of what's essential, right? Between the first line of sight and the second. He's delivering himself right in front of us. Winnicott also noticed something else about the boys' breathing when they begin to draw together. They take turns. Winnicott draws a squiggle. The boy draws a squiggle on top of it, and Winnicott says, "What's that?" You know, that's the game they play, and then they do it, and then they reverse the field. He noticed when they began to draw, and he says, "I noticed that while he was doing this rather deliberate work, that every time he breathed, he made a little push with his breath." Exquisite detail. As yet, he does not know why the breathing, as you see, is taking an extra effort all the time. So, but Winnicott doesn't know why this boy's breath is so bated. Now the boy and Winnicott exchange 8 drawings and name them, and the boy gets more at ease, and Winnicott says, "Okay, now you can tell me a dream." They take the dream drop. And the dream is this. The first is about a witch that took him away when he was 6 or 7 and a half. And the second is about his father. And then he says, "This is the drawing of the place that witch took him to a coal mine." I guess in England that's a dangerous place. There's a fire in the coal mine, and the witch has pots and pans on the shelf. She has a pointed hat and a tail. She can be seen sitting on a 3-legged stool, like Dalsimos here. And then there was a man with a violin case that had a strap around it. And Alfred's father was playing the violin. Alfred was rather pleased at having done this all by himself. "Oh, we're doing it in time. We're just fine." So Winnicott has 8 minutes left. This, as I said, Jane, when I have 8 minutes, I do it in 8 minutes. When I have 2 minutes, I do it in 2, which turned out to be highly dramatic. Winnicott says to the mother, they must get to what happened when Alfred was 6 and a half. The dream has a marker on it of time. That's when the witch stole the boy away, right? The mother replies, "Oh, didn't I tell you that at that time his father had a mental breakdown?" You see, his father found his new job exacting, and he got caught up in tremendous effort to succeed. The father ended up in a mental hospital for several months when Alfred was 6 and a half. Now, Winnicott has 3 minutes, Justin. Ready for the next 3 minutes? I mean, that's a pretty good start. To have Alfred in. That was between Winnicott and the mother. He says, "I got 3 more minutes, Alfred, you come in." And he says to him, "Did you remember this breakdown about your father?" Alfred's head went back like that and he jerked himself into a memory of this illness of his father, which he had completely forgotten. He looked immensely relieved. I said, "You've been trying all this time." You could cry here, it's so beautiful. "You've been trying all this time, not because of your own need to try. And you told me things go better if you don't try. You've been trying hard on your father's account. And you were still going on trying to cure your father of his worry about his work when he could not do it well enough. So that's why you push every time you breathe out. And as you told me, it's this pushing and trying that interferes with all your work and your talking, and that's what makes you stutter." Well, Alfred immediately eases up. That was the last of stuttering with Alfred. And 7 years later, on a follow-up, the boy he's fine. No more stuttering for 7 years. For a 3 minute. How do you like that for 3 minutes? I bet you'd like to do that. So the detail in the second big dream falls into place as follows. We better finish this lecture. He, the father, has a violin, and the strap round the violin, says Winnicott, represents the fact that the father has not been able to develop his musical instrument, his musical interests. It could be said this way, that if I could undo the strap of the father's violin, when his father could be creative and could get into contact with his deeper self. And with his father happier, Alfred would be able to give up pushing and overstraining in a hopeless attempt to boost his father's effort, to make a success of a hated routine job that is the reverse of creative. There we have the simplest access in 2 lines of sight into the unconscious. The first citing the huge effort on behalf of the disturbed father, the pathology, and second, cite undoing the strap around the father's violin and around Alfred's breathing, right, simultaneously. All right, now, everything's not going to be okay with Alfred just here, because he's got to grow up like we do. And now we're going to talk about what further maps in the final 5 minutes here, that Alfred and we will need. Alfred has got to find his own position in E.O. Wilson's core habitat. We all have to find our positions, which means to find some good trees that overlook the savanna and the waterhole, metaphorically, so to speak. So this is where Winnicott reaches the limit of being helpful, like psychoanalysts often are limited, that they're limited by a perspective confined to the past and the inner world. But now I'm placing it into the outer world. So let's look at my drawing on the board there. It's E.O. Wilson's core habitat, which later there's a house in that, and which I add later, because we'll talk about how Bachelard adds a house to the whole situation. So consider Alfred. That's Alfred and his girlfriend at age 17 up in the trees at the bottom. You see those green trees? As Stuart said to me last night in his email, the tree is the setting of transformation. And so it's a good place to be. And so they're set up beautifully. They can see everything that's happening out. See what's the water hole there above it, and the antelope and the lions and so forth. And so you see that's what a dramatic setting that is. They can see easily. They can come down when the lions go away, and they can chase the antelope when the lions go away, and then they can get back up in the tree for the night. What a deal, huh, Ryan? All right, so we can come back from that diagram. We're going to come back to it in a few minutes. All right, now I've called this my prepositional theory of dreams and of psychiatry. How so? By this I mean that dream maps consist of actions or movements or verbs that are positioned by prepositions, like in or out. So Alfred and his girlfriend take in the whole situation. Let's go back to the diagram again. See position 2? That's a line of sight in the trees, right? And that position is fundamentally different from position 1, where those antelope are sitting there. Now, you would not want to be in position 1, but from position 2, you get to see the whole thing. You get the water, and you get to get away. Okay, we can come back here. So that's what I mean by a prepositional theory, that everything depends on positioning. Okay, but a few of us can take this wonderful capacity that we're talking about here. We stare at lists all day long that we have to check off. We're getting just like Alfred's father, right? It's dangerous, because then we lose our senses. We lose our eyes and our ears, and we ignore our dream maps at 4 a.m. So it's really dangerous. Thus, as I say, we've lost when we lose our senses, we lose our minds in their full power. But we need not. And here's the good news, and we'll end on this, and we'll come back one more. We need our field is profoundly and simply biological. Almost all of our patients can be addressed by asking 2 simple questions that correspond to numbers 1 and 2 there in the diagram. How did you walk into being captured this week? Look at position 1. Well, you see how the antelope walked into it. They were looking for water. And then I also get the patient every hour to say, how do you already know what to do? And the patient will look in another direction, and they'll be in position 2, and they'll be an observer of the whole thing. And they'll be out of range. Okay. Now, as for us in this field, we get to actually, having been around for 2 million years, as Stuart and I have been, and Justin too. Dalsimos, he's been here only 1 million years. Yeah. For 2 million years, we have had the whole array of opposites, from hot to cold, dry to wet, sweet to rotten, and so forth. Not just antelopes and lions, you see. And I do this all the time on the tennis court. I'm in a continuous array of fast to slow, short to long, smash, drop, left, right, etc. My wife and I watch the Berlin Philharmonic every night now for a couple hours on YouTube. It's so incredible. And under Simon Rattle, their continuous counterpoint, so striking and subtle across 12 sections of the orchestra, a dimensionality of opposites, like nature itself. So it's possible to put yourself in the core habitat, you see, musically, athletically, and in your office. We'll come back to that. I'll explain that, especially in your own private space. Now, Alfred, I'm going to address Alfred. This is what we were selected for. Why should we accept anything less than this? My dream last night comments profoundly on the profound importance of habitat. What allows us to have this wealth of being? At first I thought the dream was nothing. I dreamed that I was the lecturer, and it was turning completely white. The whole thing disappeared on me, the lecture, and I thought, oh, this is not good. So I go up to my study, and I sit in my chair up in my study, and I think, I love this house. I'm up here in the trees, on the 3rd floor. I'm in my core habitat. I am just absolutely fine. And we've lived in this house for 40 years almost in Madison. And I think, what a place to be. So then let's go back to the diagram. Now we put the house in there. And you see that the tree is the setting of transformation, but the house is in Gaston Bachelard's Poetics of Space. The house is in a way substitutes for the trees, you see. You can see why that might be. And then, as Stuart was saying to me, the tree is the axis mundi. It is the Bodhi tree of the Buddhism. It is the cross of Christianity. It is the Yggdrasil of Norse myth. We're at the absolutely core mythology of the species here. So anyway, as Bachelard says, we can come back from the diagram so you can hear the end of the lecture, that houses are tremendously important, because they shield us from the dangerous world. Curled up in our houses, we can imagine the world outside, in other words, position 1 out there where terrible things happen, from position 2 in which we can see and hear and cannot be seen and heard. You see what I mean by my prepositional theory of dreams and of our work, for it's all about positioning that has to be accurate. My dream was showing me how invaluable is our house, and its positioning is equivalent to the trees in Wilson. You see, Alfred, how this comes back to you? Your house is your core habitat. Was very threatened for you by your father being disturbed out there in position 1. That is terrible. In position 2, what happens to him out there in position 1 shakes you to the core in position 2. He lost his capacity to play the violin, and he seems to have been captured by a witch and spirited away. Of course, being 17 now, Ryan, you need to begin to imagine your own house and how to secure it in the world without becoming disturbed yourself. Thank you.